Hello everyone, David here with the Paradox engine, and I'd like to do a Aura Retrospective video on the character I played in a group during the 3.16 patch. Before I get too much into the build, I think it's important to talk about a paradigm shift that occurred in this patch. In the 3.16 patch, Grinding Gear Games made several changes to the availability of Aura effects, specifically on cluster jewels. And they also changed the way that Aura Reservation works. Instead of reducing the percent of mana or life that each Aura reserved, which could theoretically reach 0 if you had 100% reduced reservation, they added in, or they changed it into an efficiency system, which means that there is no way to get 100% reduced reservation anymore, and you're going to get limited or reduced effectiveness per piece of that stat that you get. This changed the build, at least in the way that I was designing it. I think in the way that many other people design it as well, away from being a build that is focused around getting as much reduction in reservation as they can, assuming that they can pick up or affect somewhere else, and being forced to prioritize Aura effect, and then finding more creative ways to reserve their auras, or just running less. And in our case, we do both of those things. We resort to March of the Legions to help reserve auras, and we drop an aura. I think we drop Malevolence. I think that's the only one that we drop in the build. And we also scale down the level of precision and clarity, so that we can fit everything in there. In this system, I think I should talk about the reservation strategy first, just because that requires less pieces of gear. In this case, we use a helmet. You can use either Alpha's Howl or Mask of the Tribunal. Because we are attribute stacking, I decided to use Mask of the Tribunal. I'll talk a bit more about that later when we get into the gearing. But the other thing that I use is reservation notables, which have been changed from medium to smalls. They no longer grant Aura effect, now they grant reservation or mana reservation efficiency of skills. We don't use any life reservation, so this is not a big deal. That this is not total reservation efficiency, and it's just mana reservation efficiency. Our jewels, for the most part, I think all of them except this one, have 25% increased effect of notables, which changes our reservation from 6% to 7%. We need this on everything here except for one. This jewel's mostly an experiment, and we use 1 voices and 1 large to fit that all in. And then we get some more reservation efficiency from Mask of the Tribunal, which is 2% per 250 total attributes. So that provides a bit there. This, even with all these attributes, it's still less than an Alpha's Howl, but there are some other benefits on the mask that merit using it. I'll also like to talk about some masteries while we're here. We do use the Reservation Mastery, which is not this one. It's this one here. 15% increased mana reservation efficiency from skills. Since we're not using any life to reserve our auras, we don't worry about the aura reservation efficiency from life. I think there's 30% on this mastery. We also avoid all the masteries which provide reservation efficiency of specific auras, even though the numbers are higher. Because we are running so many auras, it would be better to take more points in these clusters, like change this to a 25% increased effect, or make this 3 passives, or even get another set of voices. Just because 25% to discipline, or 25% to grace, or 100% to clarity, precision, or vitality is just so much worse than getting another reservation efficiency cluster point. So that's all we do for clusters. Now is probably a good time, since we're on the topic of aura reservation and stuff like that, to talk about aura effect. You'll see here in the build purities, which are very, very big to the defensive layers. They have an overall aura mod of 2.6. This means that with level 23 purities, we will be receiving 13 additional max res, which puts us to 88. This means that our carry, who is using 2 Nebulous to scale damage, can anoint the Prismatic Skin notable, which is down here. and get to 90 all res, which is the cap, and scale Nebulous as high as it can go. We also reach 90 all res, but we don't anoint Prismatic Skin because we require Champion of the Cause. We do it with some shenanigans with Militant Faith. Militant Faith is a big deal in the build, and I think it deserves its own section where we talk about all those mechanics at once. So I'm going to leave that for now. But we can hit 90 all res even with a 2.6 multiplier on our purities. Another thing about hitting this threshold, we breach 2.5, which is the threshold for Scion Necro, to go from 4% cast speed per aura to 5, which is nice. We also breach, well, we get the Scion Necro, which is very good. This also means that we can add 40% from a level 21 generosity or using an awakened generosity to breach the 3.0 times multiplier on auras. These auras then would scale Scion Necro another time. They can also scale Scion Guardian from 2% physical damage reduction or PDR to 3 per aura, which makes it much stronger defensively. We do that, well, yeah, I'll talk about that later in a bit, but we do have access to both of those things with 2.6x. With the removal of Cluster Jewels as a source of aura effect, we have to resort to other means, and we have to like very heavily build around it. So we can go to the items and we can see the effects of that here. We have the Waka Tutuki Omatua, the Spirit Shield, 20%. This shield also gives us not a lot of energy shield, especially compared to a rare, but it gives us a little bit, which is fine. It also makes our auras doubly, well, it is 40% increased aura effect on minions, which helps those minions survive since we run some spectres. It also allows us to apply regen to ourselves and to our allies if we blocked recently, which is I found to be a very, very nice defensive layer. We also use a Jinx Juju. Previously, we would use like a rare amulet with the same anointment, of course, but you would do something like reduced reservation, but since the change to the efficiency system, it's not worth the slot, and we really need that aura effect, so we're going to go with Jinx Juju here. We've also catalyzed all of our jewelry for attributes because we're attribute stacking and it's fairly cheap. Additionally, for aura effect, we use a Mask of the Tribunal. This Mask of the Tribunal gives 15% increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills. Very important to reach that 2.6 multiplier. Theoretically, if you didn't have this, you can get 15% aura effect from the tree that we haven't gotten. It would involve repathing the Ascendancy or playing a champion, but I really enjoy the defensive layers that Guardian gives, so I elect to take the Guardian side of Scion instead of going down here to champion for that 15%. And I think the last piece of aura effect that really get on our gear is our chest piece. This chest piece is a little bit more than what you would need. It's also hunter influenced for what ends up being like 6% spell and attack block, but you don't really need that. You don't even really need a Vol Regalia because we have like 7k energy shield with the Vol Regalia. If you lose like 200 energy shield, you're still going to be survivable. Like if you look at the EHP here, we have 500 plus K, which is pretty good. So the base type is flexible as well. You can survive with a 25% increased effective non-curse auras from your skills Redeemer mod, which is the non-elevated version. It means that you either have to like spec into champion or play champion to get this aura effect, but in the early league, while you're still gearing your character, it's totally fine to be 25% instead of 30, because you're not even running the super juicy content yet, I think. But it is something you'll look to do, and adding the increased offering effect from Hunter provides an interesting upgrade path. That's all for the aura effect. However, there is another pair of items that are aura related. We use March of the Legions. This Corrupted Implicit is totally unnecessary. I actually vaulted on. I don't think I would go and buy this myself, but we hit it accidentally, so I just decided to use it instead of selling it because I was lazy. This really fixes our mana reservation problem from running so many auras at once. It means that instead of running 4 50% auras, we just run one. Well, we run all 4, but we only have to pay for one at a time, which is very nice. And then I talked earlier about having level 23 purities, and the way we do that is using a Kalesis Grace. Using Kalesis Grace wasn't intentional. I just searched for gloves with a lot of energy shield for less than 10C that had +2 aura gems, and Kalesis Grace showed up. And I was like, oh, that's really neat. It gives decent energy shield and it also has some intelligence, which is really nice since we happen to be intelligence stacking. So this is very flexible. You could probably craft a rare, which is much better than this. But this is what I had, and it never felt like this was something that needed to be upgraded. So I didn't spend money there, even though in retrospect, this may have been a better upgrade path than some of the other stuff I did. Items. We've talked about this. I guess we can go on to jewels now. For Aura Effect, there is Militant Faith and an Unnatural Instinct, which, as I talked about earlier, deserve their own section, so I'm not really going to talk about them here. Voices, fairly self-explanatory. A large cluster jewel, also fairly self-explanatory. I just use it for Veteran Defender. It provides a small buffer for elemental resistances, so you're more insulated against things like Scorch or Curse, and it also provides some attributes, which is nice. And then the smalls, I talked about again earlier in their own section. They're 25% increase effect, aura or mana reservations. We use a Conqueror's Potency for aura effect, and we use a Pure Talent for attributes. Now you'll see on the Pure Talent and the Conqueror's Potency, we have some chance to avoid bleeding. This is because, as you may have seen earlier when I showed you the calc page, we have very, very low effective damage over time pool for physical damage. Everything else here is above 150k, but our physical damage over time pool is less than 25, which is very sad. So we stack bleed avoid chance here on some jewels, so we don't have to deal with that. I've never had a problem with being bled after making this change. 93% feels good, but it would also be nice to get that to 100. So I think this is good enough to say this 24k is not so big of a deal, but this is a problem. So in rituals that have those damage over time totems, you have to be careful. In cases where you're running scourged maps, which are take physical damage over time based on the amount of blood you have in the blood crucible, this also becomes a problem, especially in rituals where you can't shift into nightmare, and alvas where you can't shift to nightmare. You and your party really has to be on top of your vault discipline game in order to keep everyone alive, since the regen is not enough to compensate for the physical damage you'll be taking in those situations. Let's see. We also run a Sign of the Sin Eater. You can swap this out for an Ephemeral Edge, and if ailments become really problematic for you, it's probably better to have the Ephemeral Edge in there. But Sign of the Sin Eater gives us a really nice smite, so that saves us a socket. Socket space is good. Level 30 smite, otherwise unobtainable. Strength and int, also nice for our stacking. And making it so that your party doesn't have to worry about elemental ailments as much is very nice. So your carry is never going to get chilled or shocked and fall over, since you'll be eating all of those. Now, we need to find a way to deal with ailments. So we use a Watcher's Eye here. This Watcher's Eye is a bit niche, as they tend to be immune to shock, immune to ignite, and then we use a Pantheon for immune to freeze, and then Abrath is like immune to burning ground. But this is how we deal with our ailments, and in early league I think this is going to be a lot harder to find, and if you can't find it and you find that ailments are a problem, definitely swap out that Sign of the Sin Eater for something like an Ephemeral Edge. It's a lot safer to do. You drop a little bit of attributes, but I don't think this is like a value you're feasibly getting in early game anyways. Besides, this Mask of the Tribunal is like, it's going to have to get found, and it'll be kind of expensive, so you don't really have to worry about that to start with. I actually ran Edge of the Ephemeral for a very, very long time before I swapped over. Let's see. Also talked about this. Okay, now we can go into our flasks. These flasks get used on block, which happens fairly frequently because of our bone offering. Our roomies gives us more block, which means we're more likely to block in the future, which means we're more likely to refresh this duration. And in a clearing environment, you're really not strapped for charges, so you'll be getting flash charges. This spell suppression is the only suppression we have in the build, so that's nice. It's a defensive layer we're not really spec'd into, so we can take advantage of it very well. Evasion rating is nice. Having a chance to avoid damage from attack hits is very good. And then Roomies is block chance and a bit of armor. And then these are just enkindled quicksilvers. The suffixes aren't really important. They're kind of nice, but they don't really matter. We just alternate between them to run really fast so we can catch up to the group if they leave us in the dust. I think that's most of the itemization out of the way, except for the stuff that I explicitly wanted to hold for later. So now I think we should discuss ascendancies. Now, one option choice that I've been seeing very prominently in popular Aura bots is going champion. Because champion gives you inspirational, and inspirational gives you 30% increase effect of non-curse auras from your skills, which is absurd. It's a lot. I also think it's nice because Master of Metal, if you're running something like Penance Brand, which wants to convert physical damage into lightning, into cold, into fire, getting damage in early in that chain really scales very well. Also, you can give armor to allies, which is very nice for physical damage mitigation. And you also have this taunt wheel, which is less damage. They deal less damage as long as they're hitting anyone else. You always taunt on hit. I think you taunt permanently, right? Maybe I'm misremembering that. No, it doesn't look like you taunt permanently. But like they can't evade attacks. Well, which I guess is less important for our build because we're using a Penance Brand carry. But enemies taunted by you take 20% increased damage. So I can understand why this is very appealing. I don't like it as much because in order to get to this tree, pathing out a duelist is somewhat expensive. Also, Scion has the ability to give you a lot of passive points. So between those two, I don't think losing the passive points is particularly worth it. Though getting inspirational allows you to reach the old 3.0 X threshold, with investment, mind you, but it's feasible in the March of the Legions. So you can get 90 all-res without having to resort to prismatic skin or a timeless jewel or something like that, which is rather nice. Alternatively, there's Necromancer. Necromancer provides very good scaling on cast speed, which is very important for our Penance Brand carry. It provides a bit of elemental resistance on top, which could be a problem if you don't have a lot of aura effect. It also gives you Mistress of Sacrifice, so you have offerings affect you. This skill effect duration is also nice for your March of the Legions, and being able to block more frequently is very good. And then you also have access to Plaguebringer Corpse Pact, which is basically a free skitterbots and more damage, 10% more damage, and ink AoE for your auras, which is fairly appealing, but it has very little in the way of party defensive layers, the way that Champion does, the way that Scion does, and the way that Guardian does. But it's very nice for offense. Guardian, of course, has access to Unwavering Faith for physical damage reduction and regen. It also has access to Radiant Crusade for Onslaught, and then you can choose between Radiant, and you could go Unwavering, or you could do something like Block or Curse Reduction if you wanted to. Again, like, Necro is very good offensively, Guardian is fairly good defensively, but it lacks the sort of offensive layers. And all of these three, Guardian, Necro, and Champion, lose out on the added passive points that Scion can grant you. I choose to go Scion. In the early league, you have flexibility in running Champion for 15% increased aura effect while you're still gearing. Guardian gives you 25% reduced effect of curses, which means that a curse will not put you below 90 all-res here once you're geared. You have charge sharing, which means that your grave binds, or if your carry can generate charges and pass them around, and everyone can take advantage of them. And you also get some really strong regen, and you have Onslaught from Guardian. So these are all very good. Necromancer, you get the offerings from Necromancer, so you can also do this bone offering tech. You get a lesser version of the Aura attack and cast speed, which is still very strong, especially for Penance Brand. And then you get the Ink AoE that Necro gets from consuming corpses. So I personally think that this is the best configuration of it, but I could understand cases made for all three of them, depending on what your party has and what sort of composition you're trying to fit into. So let's see, I talked about Champion, I talked about Master of Metal, yes. Scion is versatile. Oh, also, Scion gives you access to some attributes, which helps us with our Mask of the Tribunal stacking, which is like not huge, but it's something. Next, I think is probably prudent to talk about the passive tree. We anoint, I talked about this earlier, Champion of the Cause, it's non-curse aura effect and it's Reservation. It's sort of a no-brainer. We come out of Scion in a slightly untraditional way. Normally I think you come out to the right, which I started doing, but I needed this mana, so I came out to the left. Since I'm pathing through here anyways, there's no extra points spent, so it's just mana, which is good for us. We take increased duration for our March of the Legions, and then we take these wheels because of the transformation of the notables from our Timeless Jewel, which I'll touch on a bit later. We come out here, we take Energy Shield, which is good because it adds devotion for our Timeless Jewel, and it's, Energy Shield. We come around, we grab this Jewel Socket for the Watcher's Eye. Also, it's a bit of devotion. We take the Leadership Wheel. We intuitive leap across to Charisma and this Reservation. We come up here. We path around this way because I did this because I wanted Wicked Ward, Arcane Focus, and Utmost Intellect. And if you're taking all these anyways, it saves you 1 point rather than going up this arm, which is typical with Aura Bots. We come up here for the Jewel Socket. We grab Chaos Inoculate to be immune to chaos damage. We get Influence, and then on the left side, we come up through here. We take Insightfulness because we need the Energy Shield and we need the mana. We can't afford to lose any of that if we want to keep our Vitality at level 20. We take the Zealot's Oath, we take this Voices to fit our smalls in, and then we come down here for Sovereignty, which is Aura Effect and Reservation. All that stuff is like really important. Now that I've talked about all the rest of the build, I think now we should get into the Militant Faith here, which is very, very meaty for the build. You'll see here if I hover it that it provides 1% increased effect of non-curse auras per 10 devotion. Most people that I've seen who work on Aura Bots and have publicized their Aura Bots, or previously Aura Stackers, have emphasized Glorious Vanities as a very good way to get Aura effect if you can find the right seed. But Glorious Vanities got nerfed in the most recent patch. The small notables which can roll Aura Effect have had their Aura Effect reduce, and the notables which previously rolled from 10 to 15% increased Aura Effect now only roll from 7 to 10. So, with the 220 devotion we have, this Militant Faith provides us 22% increased effect of non-curse auras from skills, which is effectively like 3 low-rolled Glorious Vanities. It's a lot more deterministic to hit and a lot less expensive because a lot less people are looking at it and trying to farm it out. This Militant Faith also provides us the seed in particular, 8,923 provides us with some very, very good transformations here. It doesn't hit Foresight, it doesn't hit Potency of Will, so we get to keep these. It transforms this minion block node into Intolerance of Sin for +1 max all-res. It transforms this mana node to another Intolerance of Sin for +1 max all-res, which allows us to reach our 90 all-res cap while using 88 max res from our Purities, which is really nice. And also this Enduring Faith node provides us with a minimum endurance charge, which is fairly useful in bossing circumstances to provide us additional physical damage reduction in cases where mobs are not getting killed all the time to provide endurance charges to us. So this is nice as well. There's also an interaction that's like known. You can find it, but it's not super well known. That Militant Faith and all the other timeless jewels specifically say that they conquer notables within their radius. Now, when a notable is conquered by a timeless jewel, it cannot further be modified. This means Might of the Meek cannot amplify it, and it also means that Unnatural Instinct cannot change the small passive to grant nothing. And because of that, we get to use this Unnatural Instinct to get a ton of devotion, like 85 devotion here. We also get to keep the devotion that we spec'd on the travel points on the way there. So this provides, for 4 points, this provides 15 plus 85, 100 devotion for 4 points. So that's 2.5% aura effect per node. It also provides some movement speed, which is a nice quality of life. It provides a bit of skill duration, which helps with our March of the Legions and our Vol skills. And it provides Res to pad our curses and scorches. And it provides block chance and some attributes. So it's just a very nice jewel, very nice placement, very nice interaction. Let's see. I think that's everything on the passive tree. So now I'm going to go talk about the skills that we use. So we have very few. I was talking about it a bit earlier about using generosity in our links to reach a certain multiplier. We have very few of these. We only have 3 auras. This is socketed in the sign of the Sin Eater. So we have Vitality, which is level 20, Precision, which is level 1, and Smite, which is level 30. The generosity on the Vitality is very, very good for the other characters. We have our own regen. We are a Guardian, or a Scion Guardian, so we get some regen. We also have a Stone Golem in the build, which provides regen. And also, since we are using a Zealotry in any sort of bossing situation, there will be patches of consecrated ground that we can stand on to regen, in addition to our Vol Discipline. So our survivability is alright. I was a bit more worried about our carry surviving, so I put the Vitality in here. Though, if you feel that your regeneration is not what you want it to be, you can try and swap this out for our Clarity, which is somewhere else in the build. We'll get to that later. It's level 1, so you can swap those around and get some more regeneration for yourself at the cost of a little bit of regeneration for your allies. In the March of the Legions, we use our damage auras. Now, some people are using the March of the Legions and the 12% increased aura effect they give to improve their purities. I don't like doing this because there are moments in maps and in bosses where I'm not paying attention all the way and one of these buffs will fall off. And if a purity falls off and I go from capped res to like minus 10 res, or I go to minus 1 res, I will fall over and I will die, and then everyone will die. So for my peace of mind, I've put these damaging auras, or these offensive auras, in the marshes, so if we lose them for a second, it's not the end of the world. Purities, we have in the Khaleesi's Grace, the +2 aura gem Khaleesi's Grace. We use an Enlighten here, actually. It saves some passive points. I only really thought to use one. I didn't want to use too many of them, but I think it's appropriate here because it saves us like quite a bit of mana reservation. I think this would turn our large into a Voices, and I didn't want to do that. And compared to small clusters that were item level 84 plus, which would be needed to roll 35% increase effect, the Enlighten was much, much cheaper. And I think that would be the other way that you'd get around using an Enlighten, would be using 35% increased effect, which would turn these 7% MREs into, or mana reservation efficiency node would turn them into 8%. So that would give you the reservation you need to drop the Enlighten. I talked about it earlier. We use a Summon Stolen Golem for regen. This is a Vol Grace, but I don't use Vol Grace just because I don't have enough buttons to click. I'm right-clicking Smite. I'm middle mousing Flame Dash. I'm left-clicking, shift left-clicking my Defiance Banner, QWERing my March of the Legions, and then I have my T key is being used for Vol Discipline. So there's not really any space, but if you could fit it in, that's another 10% evade chance, which is nice for survivability. but I don't want to click all those buttons. We also have Volgrace. Yeah, we have Defiance Banner in here, and Flame Dash. And then in a shield, since you may have remembered from earlier, it has +3 to all minion gems. We use our spectres in here. Earlier, we tried to do a hybrid spectre AG. The AG died. And when the AG dies, you have to rebuy all the gear. And when the spectre dies, you just have to ask one of the other... or you have to go to your spectre bank and you have to say, okay, get the spectre back. So given the cost of losing one of these, I think it's much better to use the spectre here. But with Meat Shield and Minion Life, they don't die very frequently, and especially since these are all 23 and this race spectre is 24. It doesn't need to be 24. It can just be like 20 plus 3 to 23 should be fine. But we were all leveling race specters, and I hit 2, so I was like, oh, I'll just keep that for myself. Here in the main link on the chest is our 5 link. We have a cast 1 damage taken. This link used to be for auras. When I was using Ephemeral Edge, I had my smite in here. Then I swapped it to CWDT, and when I did, I didn't have anything great for this slot, so I just put in an increased duration for Molten Shell and Bone Offering. But this is just a cast 1 damage taken setup to generate corpses, consume corpses for Ascendancy, also to give us the block from Bone Offering to our minions and ourselves, and then Molten Shell. And Molten Shell is really big for the build because we have 50k armor. This provides another 10k life, which when combined with the Mana Guardian puts us something at like 21,000 total HP, which makes us very, very survivable. It should be noted in the calculations, Mana Guardian is not being calculated, but even still, we have like 550,000 HP. And I think we can tank like some, because, you know, physical damage, the larger it is, the less armor is helpful. But I think we can still tank like a, oh, no, not 40,000. Let's see. What happens if I turn the endurance charges on? Because I thought 40,000 was the number. So yeah, in a clearing environment, we can take a 40,000 damage hit. But in bosses, I think it's going to be more like 38 or 33. The endurance charges are very good. And our physical survivability is pretty good. I don't think there are many hits that hit for like 40k in the game, so I think we should be fine. Let's see, skills, yes. So Clarity is in that 6th socket in the Vol Regalia that's not linked. If you can swap it out for Vitality, it would need to be a white socket, or you'd need to recolor it, which is a little tricky on a Vol Regalia, but I imagine it's not something you'd have to do very frequently, because you'd be able to determine whether Vitality is necessary on yourself or it's fine on just the carry. And then we use some unset rings here for Determination and Discipline. I do use Vol Discipline. I think this one is very important just because we don't have Flasks on NES build. Our Vol Discipline, or sorry, our Determination is socketed in a ring with +2 level of gems. This helps us get our armor threshold so we can properly take advantage of Molten Shell, and then Sign of the Sin Eater gives us Smite. I realize now that I didn't really talk about the jewelry. I said what they did, but I didn't explain them individually. It's just attributes. This one gives energy shield. This one just gives attributes and level of socketed gem, and this one just gives attributes. But yeah, they're unset rings, so we can fit more skill gems in there. Fairly simple stuff. Okay, now that I've sort of like gone over the build, I think I should provide some context for how we constructed it. Oh, wow. How we constructed it. I don't know how long that's been there. And how we played it. So when we started the league, for me and 3 of my friends, so 4 of us, we decided we wanted to do some group play. But we didn't want to do group play until we sort of had the Atlas set up. So for the first week of the game, we had the person who played our carry. We all played solo builds, and the person who did our carry set up his Atlas so we could start a farming strategy there, and the rest of us went off and did solo play. Now, once the Atlas was set up, the 4 of us pooled what money we had, and we started purchasing gear for the Aura Bot. and we got some very basic gear for the carry. The Mana Guardian, which we have, and our Curse Quant Hybrid, we would construct a couple days after that. But most of the money that we got in the very early portion that wasn't being reinvested into maps went into the Aura Bot. So this Aura Bot has like a decent amount of funding in it. It's not crazy or anything like that, but it is a non-zero amount of money. The sort of content that we do or that has been tested, our farming consists of running port maps with Abyss Scarabs, Ambush Scarabs, Divination Scarabs, and one other's Legion maybe? I don't remember what it is. I don't really host that. But we do 4 orb, 4 Watchstone ports in the 5 socket map device with juice on it. We scourge it once. We run builders for increased effect of non-unique map modifiers, and we use the sextants to get Nemesis 3, and then we alch our maps for Nemesis, and then we beast augment them or beast slam them to 6 mods. So it's fairly juicy content. It's not the hardest content in the game, though it's close-ish, I think, and it runs that fairly smoothly. We don't really die in those maps. The only time people die is when the Aura Bot disconnects because they're using a wireless setup. Wi-Fi is not treating them very well, or treating me very well. To get the passive points set up and for fun, the Carrie and I have duoed Maven, we've duoed Cirrus, we've duoed Uber Elder, we've duoed every invocation, and then as a 4-man, as part of aspirational content, we've 4-manned Simulacrum 30, we've 4-manned a Blight Ravaged map, and we've 4-manned a Flawless Breachstone. And the only thing that gave us a tiny bit of trouble was the Blight Ravaged map, and that's because we were using a bad setup, and we weren't using towers at all. So we whiffed the first one. And then the second one, we took it a little bit more seriously, and it was fine. Going back a bit to monetization of the build, we bought it, the economy has changed at different points in the league, so I think the build has gotten more expensive, but certain items have gotten cheaper. For example, Son of the Sin Eater, always fairly cheap. This shield, the Matua, was very expensive at league start. We waited until like day 8 or 9, I think, to buy this, like right before we started doing the group play. We had the unupgraded version before then, and it was like 30 something C, but right at league start it was an X to get this shield. This Mask of the Tribunal we transitioned into fairly late. I was running an Alpha's Howl for a while before this. I think this was like end of week 2, maybe start of week 3. We paid 2x for this, though I think the price has increased quite a bit to like maybe 10x. Also, the enchant we rolled ourselves. I think with the enchant, this is probably more like 15x, but this helmet is not cheap by any means. This Vol Regalia, we crafted ourselves, or I crafted myself, using the guild's money. This is very extra. The elevated Redeemer mod on a poo-poo base is probably like, I don't know. You could craft it fairly easily. I don't know what it's like now, but I think in crafting this, I spent somewhere. I got very lucky. I hit the Maven's Orb on the first try, but I think I still spent something like 7 exalts to make this. Getting the base, getting the bases, getting the Maven's Orb, and then elevating. Oh no, but I had to combine them together. So more like 9x, I think, to get all this done. But you don't need all this. It's a nice stretch goal, but you'd be fine with just the elevated Redeemer mod. The Cleese's Grace, I spent very little money on. You could probably improve this, make a nice rare, but I think the group play is not. I don't think the build needs any more stuff. Or if there's stuff in the group to improve, it's probably not the Aura Bot. So I think having these Cleese's Graces are fine. The March of the Legions with the Corrupted Implicit is fairly expensive. I think it's probably worth like half a dozen X, though the only listings I remember seeing for it were like 10. But we did buy this March of the Legions early league, and they were like 1x when we bought them, and then a Vol Orb for the Implicit. But you know, I don't think you really need the implicit. The Jinx Juju was fairly cheap. I think that was like a dozen chaos or so. These pieces of jewelry, I don't remember how much each of them cost. I think I would evaluate them at about an X each right now. I think I bought this one for an Exalt. I bought this one for like 50C. And then this one was like 30C and a null orb to hit a bad suffix off. But I'm not really sure what they would be priced now. Pricing rares is hard for me. I don't really understand what makes them good. These flasks, you know, you can craft them. This is very cheap. You don't really care too much about the rolls. It's whatever. I think this is actually min rolled. I think it goes up to like no. It's max rolled on spell block, so that's probably worth a little bit more. That's probably like 10C, but it's not too bad. The Militant Faith was fairly cheap. I got very lucky on the seed. I think this was the first seed that I bought, and then I ended up getting like 5 or 6 more, and I couldn't find anything better. I think this was I got for like 30C. It's probably worth like because the keystone that it provides is not very good. People want the Dominus, I think, for the Frenzy to Power Charge conversion. So this one would probably this keystone was very cheap. I think it would be very cheap. Though the seed, I don't think it exists. Voices, we paid probably like an Exalt for this, maybe 100 chaos, but now they're I would be surprised if 5 passes were more than a dozen C, but I honestly haven't looked at the price of voices in a week and a half, so I don't really know. These smalls, right now, I think they're about 40 chaos each. When I crafted them, they were 30C each, but you can probably just alt spam them. You don't even need to regal them. If you're scared of hitting a passive or a notable and ruining the small passives, so it's not so bad. The Unnatural Instinct at the time cost 3.4x. I think it costs like 3 now, maybe. But that fairly expensive, but unlikely to change and very good for the build. Intuitive Leap was cheap. This was like 30x, or sorry, 30C, 30C with the implicit, and I think 15 without. So pretty cheap. I don't think this is very expensive. I think a lot of people don't like it after the passive tree changes in the patch. Pure Talent, also fairly cheap. I think this was also like 30C, though I might be misremembering because of the implicit, but I think it's more like 15 without, maybe even less. Conqueror's Potency, 15C with the implicit. You get one from the story, otherwise it's not such a big deal. And then this Watcher's Eye, I got it very cheap. I got it for 20C, but I think I talked about it earlier when I was talking about the Watcher's Eye, that it's very lot of variance, and it's very possible that this thing just doesn't exist early league, or if it does, someone is going to price it really high. So I don't feel comfortable saying this is a 20C jewel just because it's a Watcher's Eye. I think that covers all of the items. It covers all of the prices. We've talked about the compositions, the sort of content that we're running. I think that's about everything. I hope you've enjoyed this video on the retrospective of the Aura Bot. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I don't really read them very often, but maybe I'll swing by once or twice, and if there's anything I can do to help, I'll try and do that. If you want to fiddle with the path of building yourself, I'll leave a paste bin link in the description, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.